winning a scrappy one in the moment. Even if Muhammad cannot crowd him and force exchanges, he can force Edwards to move and use that movement to herd him towards the cage. In the first fight, every engagement began and ended when Muhammad realized Edwards was going to be brain. Instead, each engagement must feed into the next, and each Edwards adjustment should place him closer to the cage. Muhammad did land a cracking right kick to the body towards the end of the first fight by getting close to Edwards and kicking as Edwards retreated onto the end of it. From jabbing to kicking to cage wrestling, everything is made better if Muhammad is consistently walking up to Edwards rather than trying to run at him from 6 feet away. Now, his coaches obviously saw the same things that I did and what other people did. When he was close to Edwards, he was actually doing pretty well in the first fight. His jab was landing, Edwards didn't like it, and in this fight, he basically did exactly that. He walked up to Edwards every time and stood close enough to jab him. When I say, like, there's this thing in boxing and MMA and kickboxing where people say, put him on the end of your jab. And people think that's like put him right on the end of the longest thing you've got so that you can keep him away. When I say put him on the end of your jab here, I mean stand close enough so that when you stretch your arm out, you hit him. You're not, like, lunging after him. It's got to be that you can stretch out and reach him right away. And that's what Muhammad did, and it worked really well. Because Leon Edwards doesn't like over exchanges, and he likes to circle out and mitigate that pressure. And when he tries to circle out and you're standing on top of him, you're going to be able to get him close to the cage. The cage is hugely important because this is the two-ended thing of cage wrestling in MMA. The cage is really good for getting you back up. The cage is really good for stopping the opponent from locking their hands. If the opponent has, like, an underhook and they're pinning against the fence, and you've got your hips and shoulder pressed into the cage on one side, they're going to have real trouble locking their hands behind you. It's like body lock passing on the mat. Really good if you can get the guy to sit up and then lock your hands behind his back and then squash him back down. If he doesn't sit up and he just stays flat on the mat, you can't lock your hands. It's very hard to lock your hands underneath. So the cage in the first fight, and in most Leon Edwards fights, is used to keep them from locking their hands while he pummels in an underhook or gets a collar tie and steps out and elbows them. So if you, like, charge him, you duck your head and you try and push him back with a double leg onto the fence and then try and lock your hands, you're going to have real trouble. What Bilal Muhammad did was keep him near the fence, throw punches at him, and then when he level changed, he could lock his hand under Edwards' butt before Edwards' back even hit the fence. And then you saw it multiple times throughout this fight. The locked hands double, still so powerful. He was picking Edwards up and throwing him down on the mat. And you can do that, or you can just pull their butt out and keep your head against them so that they just fall onto their butt. Once you've got your hands locked under their butt, there's a lot of different things you can do. And there's not so much they can do aside from wait to get taken down and try and jump back up. So while Bilal's boxing has definitely improved, it's stuff that he was already able to do. It was to do with, like, getting closer, applying pressure, not trying to run in from across the cage. And if you watch Bilal's fights in the UFC, against Sean Brady, he's standing on top of him very well. But, like, who was the Japanese lad he fought? Hold on. I think it was his first finish in the UFC, but I specifically remember. Yeah, his Takashi Sato fight, Curtis Melinda, Lyman Good. All these ones, he's, like, running across the cage to try and run them onto the fence, which worked at that level, but then he missed. But then it didn't work in the first Leon Edwards fight. You know, he just fought Diego Lima, who, being Douglas Lima's brother, just stands with his back foot on the fence anyway, and he was having a great time there. But against Leon Edwards, he had real trouble the first time round. By pressuring him against the fence and punching him there, and actually throwing punches and not being terrified of what's coming back, he did a great job. And with all really slick strikers who like distance and like to set things up, the more pressure you put them under, yes, you're making yourself more available to hit, but that's only to a certain point. Paradoxically, if you stay in someone's face, it makes it a lot harder for them to pick their shots, and then their activity drops off, especially if they're a really good counterpuncher. Because it makes you harder to reach. Like, if in the first fight, if Bilal made a charge at Edwards, he could back away. He hit him with a really nice counter left uppercut at one point because it was so obvious. As soon as that big distance between the two of you starts to close, he's going for it. But if he's up in your grill all the time, poking you with jabs, slapping your lead hand, it's never entirely clear when he's going to go for real. And it's a lot harder to get on one leg and throw a knee or a good body kick or something like that which is like half of Edwards' offense, because if you do, he might just step down the middle. He might just step down the middle before hitting the target, as happened to Lucas Brzeski in this card. There's a lot of like narrative afterwards about Bilal being the least skilled, least talented guy to ever win the welterweight title or whatever. I think you gotta. This is the thing with fighting. There's so much there. It's like when people say someone's an athlete or someone's not very athletic. There's so many measurements of athleticism. Being able to absorb damage for 5 rounds, being able to go for 5 rounds, is as much a form of athleticism in this sport as being very explosive is, or being very strong. I would say Bilal is basic or fundamental in what he does. Edwards is definitely the slicker technician in many regards. If you saw the takedowns that Edwards was hitting in this fight, they were much fancier than what Bilal was doing, but fancy doesn't always win. Neither do fundamentals, but fundamentals are stuff you can do easily. So there's a one where Edwards gets a knee in the middle along the cage and he swings Bilal around, ends up in a sort of dogfight position, throws his hook in on the far side and gets the back that way, and that was really impressive. It was a really nice broomstick to foot sweep in the back by Edwards. But those were like moments that he took advantage of. Bilal was able to repeatedly create the same thing happening over and over again. There was a really nice high crotch that worked twice, but dumped Edwards on his face, on his head, actually. It was really bad. He basically got pile driven. If you watch the slow-mo replay, which they showed about 100 times, he comes down on the top of his head with basically all his weight going through his spine. And those ones can end really badly. They're very grateful that didn't come out worse than it did. But it was a very impressive takedown from the back body lock. Because good fighters are good at fighting out of the back body lock and keeping themselves up while you do it. Dug between the legs, used the high crotch to pick him up. And it reminded me of something that, is it Jackson Smith? I'm always talking about this guy at the moment. He's a college wrestler who has one of the highest scoring rates of the referee's position because he lets the guy back up. I mean, they always jump up because that's the meta of college wrestling. You try and stand up. But where other people try and lock their hands when they get to the feet and then mat return them, he digs one arm between the legs and he hits what's called the Tageruma in judo, but it's called something else in sambo. It's a great throw. You just pick them up by the crotch, basically, and grab their head and swing them around. It's the most pro wrestling looking real throw that exists. But it works because people expect him to grab the back body lock. So when you're on the back body lock, if you let go and grab between the legs, under the tape and lift them, that works really well. My boy Jacob Malkoon, terrible from the back body lock. Against Brendan Allen, he got thrown twice while he was on the back body lock. Like, he had the dominant position and got thrown from it twice. And then he went, oh, hang on, if I just reach down, my single's there, my head outside single. High crotch is the head outside single, is a high crotch. They're the same thing. The finishes tend to be what people use to describe one or the other. So that was very dope. I was ready for Tom Aspinall to lose and Leon Edwards to win, so I got completely reversed expectations. But it was pleasing that Bilal Muhammad, I suppose it should have been more predictable, because I laid out exactly what you would have to do, and it wasn't that big an adjustment. If the adjustment to beat someone seems massive, that should maybe make you more skeptical of their chances. I think we're all just so skeptical of Bilal because we don't like his style. It's just, he's, well, as we're going to get into, boringness, is it a legit criticism? Certainly, 7 hours into watching these fights, it was a legit criticism of that Jordan Bannon fight. But, this is supposed to be meritocracy fighting. If you can't beat someone when they're fighting within the rules, they're the better fighter. But as we'll get into in a minute, not always the case. There have been some interesting takes like Bilal looking super juicy, people saying, oh, he's obviously roiding. I would remind you that this is the UFC welterweight division, and everyone who has won a title in that division has been a poster boy for steroids. None of them really failed tests. A couple of them fell off hard when the tests changed, Johnny Hendricks being the most obvious example. But this is the division where Kamaru Usman went into 5th rounds not even breathing hard, while having a dad who's in jail for pharmacist crime and a giant brother with gyno. Robbie Lawler, I love Robbie Lawler, but he had a career resurgence in second puberty at age 39. Matt Hughes back in the day, go look at him. GSP. Here's the thing. This is a professional sport. Let's all be grown up. If you're passing the same tests as everyone else, and Kamaru got the jacket for like 50 past tests. TJ Dillashaw got the jacket for 50 past tests and then failed on EPO, which is extremely hard to catch people for. But if you're passing the same tests as everyone else, I have no beef with you. Even if you're lactating in the fight, I don't have beef with you if you're passing the test. Honestly, with the abundance of cage wrestling, lactating on the opponent during the fight might be the next calf kick. Now, I've seen some takes that, like, Leon lost this rather than Bilal won this. It can be both. Because if the opponent is making bad decisions, it's your job to take advantage of those and force him to make those bad decisions more often. Like Ed was standing along the fence constantly. He's had success standing along the fence because he's very good at using it to hold himself up. It's just that Bilal was shooting and getting his hands up before they hit the fence because he was using striking effectively along the fence. It was a great one where Edwards occasionally goes to this shoulder roll with the elbow out in front. Very head-centric shoulder roll. It's for defending your head and not really, you sort of disregard your body. But it's what Dustin Poirier does. Diaz did it against Anderson Silva. It's a very good move for MMA, but it does leave some openings, and especially if you tuck your head forward. So Bilal went 1-2 and then left uppercut, his lead hand uppercut, straight through the crook of Edwards' elbow and hit him on the chin, which was great. And then he came in and did the same thing again, 1-2, went as if he was going to throw the left uppercut, threw the left hook to the body instead, and then changed on the double leg. Beautiful stuff. Here we are, 30 years into this, 300 and something years into boxing existing, and it is still ring craft that changes fights at the highest levels. Where the fight plays out in the ring is every bit as important as what techniques you're good at. What, you know, if you've got a wicked right hand, a wicked left hook, a great double leg. Where the fight happens, either buffs or what's the opposite of buff? Debuffs those skills. Co-main was Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blades. This was one I expected to go wrong, which I mentioned in my, I had an inkling to go wrong. I mentioned in my pre-fight article lessons from Bilal versus Leon 1. I said there's not a lot to learn from a 15-second fight, but he got on one leg and threw his rear leg hard and got counted 2 out of 3 times in 15 seconds, which isn't good if the opponent's trying to take you down. But Curtis was trying to punch you in the chin. But it's the same opening. If you can step up the inside of a kick, whether you're trying to right-hand the guy in the face or just double leg him over, tackle him, they're the same thing. And I said on the pre-fight podcast, go watch Fedor's career. He's great at getting people to low kick him and then just shooting the right hand and driving them onto their back. Whether the right hand landed, whether it hit their arm, whether it missed altogether, he took him down off the kick, off the counter right hand. Same opening. And Aspinall, to his credit, didn't come out throwing low kicks immediately. Came out throwing 1-2s with his chin up in the air, which is what he did against Sergey Pavlovich. And he always gets hit on the chin, and you always go, "Wow, that guy can take a shot." I did like that he was doing little things like you can get a long way with a 1-2 and a little bit of stuff in between. I think people get caught up in punch variety, and a lot of the best boxers don't really throw a left uppercut or a right hook. There are lesser used punches. That's one way to create variety, but you can create variety by stepping left or right, or changing up and down, pivoting. Tom Aspinall did a really nice one where he went 1-2, pivoted around Curtis and pushed him, and then gave him another 1-2, and that worked really well. This one was basically, from Curtis Blades' end, it was almost identical to the second Ngannou fight. In the first Ngannou fight, he got his jab going really well against this monster who was all punches. Blades was supposed to wrestle, and Ngannou was supposed to throw punches. And Blades was landing the jab really well. Rematch, he comes out, starts throwing that jab, and gets countered over it with the right hand pretty early on. And this one, I don't know if Blades... Looked like Aspinall was just throwing 1-2s, to be honest. Don't know if he was trying to counter across the top of the jab, but his right hand lands across the top of Curtis's jab and knocks him out. Or knocks him down. Same opening over. Curtis going confidently for that jab. You can create like a shell for yourself in the jab by getting your lead shoulder up, chin tucked into that lead shoulder, head slightly down to the right hand high. You can make it hard to hit you, but you also need to have like a conscious guard in your jab. When you throw your jab, you've got to be ready for the guy coming back. You've got to be ready to move your head, get under things, roll off punches, shoulder roll, come back. There's a level of defensive awareness there. And I think a lot of guys, when they find out they've got a good jab, and certainly when they start connecting a jab on a good striker, they go, "Oh, awesome. The jab is the most scientific weapon in boxing. Every time I throw it, any other punch, it beats. I should be able to do this forever, and then they get stuck, because that isn't the way it works. The jab is, in some respects, the best punch. Safest, least commitment, but it still requires you to commit. It still has openings, and you can get murked off it. Which is why, like, not just protecting yourself in your jab, because I think his head was a bit loose off his shoulder, and Aspinall's right hand came in and caught him in the side of the head, catching like the top of the head. But also just feinting, faking, changing up what you're doing. If you've landed 4 jabs, don't think you're going to sneak it in a 5th time because the guy doesn't know it's coming. He knows it's coming, so throw a right hand lead, throw a low kick, or fake the jab and jab again. Blades was very honest in this fight, and it got him murked. But then Tom Aspinall was very honest in this fight, and he won. So, as always, with heavyweight, it's like, it's such an unga-bunga division. The guys get to the top end with really obvious flaws in their game that aren't exploited. But well done, Mr. Petrol Hands. Calls out John Jones. John Jones... Oh, have we had the Twitter meltdown yet? I was interacting with some really weird dudes who were like, John Jones doesn't care what people online think. I'm like, do you follow your hero at all? Because he really does care what people online think. He's the most caring about what people online think of anyone. Tom Aspinall, very funny post-fight press conference. Like, I'm not interested in the yachts. I don't want to be in movies. And it's like, good. You're in the UFC. You're going to get like 500,000 show and win tops. I don't know who you're talking about. It's in getting yachts and being in movies, except Conor McGregor. And I'll remind you that he earned like 85% of the money of his career by conning people into that Mayweather fight in a different sport. A con which probably won't work again for any other MMA fighter for a long time. Best I can do you is Jake Paul versus Mike Perry. What else we got? I started watching I think the first fight I watched was Gregory Rodriguez versus Christian Leroy Duncan. I thought this would be good, and it was, but man, was it much more one-sided than I thought it would be. Rodriguez, obviously the stronger grappler, or known as the stronger grappler, but puts people under pressure, comes forward, hits them hard. Christian Leroy Duncan, you know, was expected to be like the slicker guy working on the outside, trying to throw kicks and circle off and stuff, and he very quickly realized that that was going to be harder than he'd like. I think Rodriguez threw a 2-1, combo, right hand to extend your jab, and then he hit him with a left hook as he circled out, because Christian Leroy Duncan just stiff arm with the lead hand, run round to the right, and he got cracked a couple of times with left hooks doing that. So basically, Christian Leroy Duncan got into a brawl at several points here. He must have thought, oh, I'll change it up, I'll try and fight on the inside with elbows and things. And basically, he got beaten up with punches while trying to elbow, and roughed up in the clinch while trying to use the clinch as a striking tool. I'll say his ground game didn't look bad. In the first round, he got put on the bottom in half guard, and he was holding Gregory Rodriguez's top arm. I'm going to say Robocop, that's easier. Robocop's top